guys, it's Gretchen and welcome back to my channel. Piercing bumps. No one ever wants to think about them, but unfortunately they can be part of the process of having a piercing. Now, I have done a video before just talking about the different kinds of piercing bumps, but I didn't really go into depth about each one. And for today's video, I wanted to focus on one that doesn't really get talked about too often. You always hear about people saying like, oh, I have a keloid, I have a keloid, I have a keloid. Most likely you don't actually have a keloid. Instead, what you may have is called a granuloma. Also a little bit more fun to say than a keloid, but it is not a fun thing to actually have. So for today's video, I thought I would focus specifically on what a granuloma bump is, what it may look like, what it entails, how to get rid of one, all that fun jazz. Now, sometimes granulomas are, much like keloids, a little misunderstood. I myself still struggle to know whether I've got a granuloma or just some weird ass bump on a piercing that just pops up whenever it feels like. So my hope for this video is to at least provide a little bit more understanding of this specific type of bump. What exactly is a granuloma? A granuloma is a bump that is usually small, red, and bleeds easily. And the reason why it is red and bleeds easily is because it is a collection of blood vessels. It is an overgrowth of tissue. It is basically the body's response to a wound, namely your piercing, and it's trying to fill in that hole. This type of bump is usually not very tender to touch. On that same note, please don't touch your bumps. This is actually your body's automatic inflammatory response to said wound. So this does not necessarily mean there's an infection. However, this bump can lead to an infection, but the initial granuloma does not mean you have an infection. It's just if it goes untreated, it can become one. So forming a granuloma is your body's response to either the piercing itself or something hidden or bumping the piercing. So say you've got a helix piercing, and with our mask wearing, say you're pulling the mask off and the little string of your mask gets caught on it, that could actually, if it happens enough or if it causes enough trauma to the piercing, can cause a granuloma to basically form. The big difference with granulomas from other piercing bumps is that it doesn't usually show up until 6+ weeks after you've gotten your piercing. It's not gonna be one of those things that just pops up as soon as you've gotten your piercing done. It can take weeks or even months before one forms. So just real fast, what is the difference between a granuloma and say a keloid or a pustule, which is another kind of piercing bump? When you hear the word pustule, what does it sound like that piercing bump is gonna have? Pus. Basically, a pustule looks like a pimple on your piercing. A little bit gross, I get that. Piercing bumps in general are a little gross. But the main difference between a granuloma and a pustule is that because there is pus within a pustule, that means there is a localized infection. Whereas with a granuloma, it doesn't necessarily mean you have an infection. It can become one, but it doesn't start off that way. A pustule is an infection, and that's why pus is being formed, but it is a localized one. It's not gonna like spread or anything like that. It's just confined to that bump. Keloids. Everyone thinks they have a keloid. Most likely do not. This is an overgrowth of scar tissue. These specific bumps do form over wounds, so namely a piercing in this case. A big difference between a keloid and a granuloma is that a keloid is hard to the touch. It is also usually larger than the wound itself. So it's not gonna be this tiny bump that is on your piercing. So take for example a nostril piercing, it's not gonna be this tiny little bump that's there. It's gonna typically be larger than the hole itself. Keloids can also grow. They usually don't cause any kind of detrimental damage, but it's more of a cosmetic thing. Especially if they get bigger, a lot of people can feel very self-conscious about them. So with that little bit of knowledge and understanding about granulomas and how they differ from other piercing bumps, if you have one, how do you deal with it? Well, the best thing I can say is to leave it alone. Go about cleaning it like you would any other time with your saline solution. Don't try and do anything extra to it. Hopefully with enough cleaning, it will go away on its own. Along with cleaning it, do keep in mind though that because it is a collection of blood vessels and it's nice and red and all that, it can bleed easily. So, for example, I did have a granuloma at one point. It was on my tragus. It was on this tragus. I always forget which one was the first one. It was my left tragus, that was my first one. My tragus was doing fine. I wanted to change the jewelry one day, so I had my mom help me. She pulled the jewelry off, and then all of a sudden there was just this gush of blood. She was like, oh my gosh, you have this like gnarly looking bump on the backside of your tragus. A lot of people will refer to a granuloma as looking like raw hamburger, which is disgusting. But that's basically what my mom said it looked like, and it did bleed easily. So when she removed the jewelry, it like removed the pressure from the jewelry, and then it just gushed blood. So keep that in mind if you do actually have a granuloma and you are cleaning the area, the piercing, the bump as normal. Do know that it has the potential to just be like, oop, blood. It's okay if it bleeds, just know that it's a possibility. Clean it up like normal. Don't, again, do anything extra to it. Just continue with your normal cleaning routine. That being said, if you do notice that the bump does not go away after a certain amount of time, you may want to seek out your piercer or a piercer that you trust if you can't get to the one that actually did the piercing. Let them look at it, let them give you their thoughts, and then go from there. Don't automatically use all of these home remedies like tea tree oil or compresses, because you don't know if that's going to do more bad than good. You could potentially seek out help from a medical professional like a doctor. However, doctors are not always trained to understand each kind of bump that forms with a piercing, so it is best to seek out the advice of a piercer who is trained to understand each kind of bump and the actual means to take care of it. At that point, the piercer may tell you to go see a doctor. So that's just a little insight to what granulomas are, what they look like, how to deal with one, whether or not to know you have one. Again, a lot of people like to jump to the conclusion that their bump is a keloid. More often than not, it isn't. So instead, you may be experiencing a granuloma or a pustule. I personally have not experienced a pustule before, which is why I wanted to make a video about granulomas, because I do have experience with that. Let me know in the comments below if you've had a granuloma before, if you thought it was something else and then it turned out it was a granuloma. Let me know in the comments below if you've had anything similar to what this sounds like, but you weren't quite sure what to call it. Let us know your experiences below. If you did something other than saline solution to get rid of it, don't tell us. I don't need anyone getting ideas in the comments. You're like, oh, well, I tried this little home remedy. No, stop it. No home remedies. None of that like toothpaste on the bump kind of stuff, or just take a bottle of tea tree oil and dunk it on the piercing. Don't give us any of that. But do let us know if you have had your own experiences with a granuloma. They're not fun, but they're not the worst kind of bump to get, because again, they are not an infection. They can lead to one, but initially they are not one. Special thank you to my patrons. You can help support the channel on Patreon while having access to videos early, viewing patron-only content, and more. But that is it for this video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a big ol' thumbs up. Go on down there and hit that subscribe button, wherever it may be, because I don't know. Even though I do, this is just my shtick now. Also hit that notification bell in case you want to know when I upload, and in case YouTube wants to let you know when I upload, because I would really appreciate it. And until next time, bye guys.